You open your eyes, and something is immediately wrong. The air is thick, dry, and tastes like dust. Your back aches from whatever you've been sleeping on, which appears to be a thin reed mat laid directly on a floor made of packed dirt. The ceiling above you is low, oppressively low, constructed from palm logs and dried mud. A single beam of sunlight cuts through a small opening high on the wall, illuminating countless particles of dust suspended in the air duct. Welcome to Egypt. The year is approximately 1250 BCE, during the reign of Ramesses the Great. You are not Ramesses. You are not a priest or a noble or anyone remotely important. You are a common Egyptian, which means your life is about to become a fascinating exercise in survival against absolutely everything. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. If you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss another journey into historical misery. And if you're already subscribed, well, you know the drill. Leave a like on this video. It helps more than you know, and honestly, the algorithm is almost as merciless as the Egyptian tax collectors we'll be meeting later. Now, where were we? Ah, yes. You're lying on a dirt floor in ancient Egypt, and you have no idea what's about to happen to you. The first thing you notice, after the dust and the aching back, is the heat. It's barely dawn, and already the temperature inside your mud brick house is climbing toward uncomfortable. By midday, this small structure will feel less like a home and more like a kill designed specifically for cooking humans. The Egyptians built their houses from sun-dried mud bricks for good reason, as the thick walls provided some insulation against the brutal desert heat. But some insulation is not the same as air conditioning. You sit up slowly, brushing sand from your skin. There's sand everywhere. In your hair. In the folds of your linen garment. In places sand has no business being. This is your life now. You will never not have sand somewhere on your body until the day you die, which statistically speaking will probably be in your mid-30s if you're lucky. The Nile River, that great giver of life, flows just a few miles from your home. Everything in your existence depends on that river. Your food, your water, your livelihood, your civilization itself. All of it flows from that muddy, crocodile-infested waterway. And speaking of crocodiles, that's just one of approximately 7,000 things in ancient Egypt actively trying to kill you. But we'll get to the crocodiles later. First, you need to start your morning routine, which involves some ingredients you might find slightly disturbing. Get comfortable. This is going to take a while. You've managed to stand up from your reed mat, and now you're taking stock of your surroundings. Your house is modest, which is a polite way of saying it's essentially a collection of mud bricks arranged in a rectangle with a roof on top. There are 2 rooms. The front room serves as your living space, kitchen, and workshop. The back room is where you sleep. That's it. That's your entire home. The floor beneath your feet is packed earth, swept smooth by generations of inhabitants. The walls are covered with a thin layer of mud plaster, which helps keep the dust down, but also needs constant maintenance. Every few weeks, you'll need to replaster sections that have cracked or crumbled. This is not optional. If you let the walls deteriorate, the entire structure could collapse. And then you'll be sleeping under the stars with the scorpions. Speaking of your morning routine, the first order of business is personal hygiene. You don't have a bathroom in any modern sense. What you have is a wooden stool with a hole in it, positioned over a pit filled with sand. This is your toilet. You do what needs to be done, then cover it with more sand. Periodically, this pit needs to be emptied. That's a job for the servants if you're wealthy, or a job for you if you're not. Now comes the interesting part. You need to wash yourself, but soap, as you know, it doesn't exist yet. What you have instead is a cleaning paste made from animal fats and natron, a naturally occurring salt compound that the Egyptians mined from dried lake beds. You mix this with water from the large clay pot in the corner of your room and use it to scrub your skin. It's not exactly luxurious, but it gets the job done. For your hair, assuming you haven't shaved it off entirely, you'll use a different mixture. Castor oil is popular, as it helps keep the hair smooth and shiny. Some Egyptians add fragrant resins to mask the smell of their own bodies. Because remember, you live in a desert with no air conditioning or deodorant dot. And now we come to the cow dung. You see, the floors of Egyptian houses need regular maintenance. To keep them smooth and relatively pest-free, you'll mix fresh cow dung with water and spread it across the packed earth. As it dries, it creates a hard, surprisingly clean surface that also helps repel insects. The ammonia in the dung acts as a natural insecticide. It's disgusting by modern standards, but by ancient standards, it's actually quite hygienic. You're also going to want to apply some makeup. Yes, even if you're a man. Both Egyptian men and women use kohl, a black powder made from galena ore, to line their eyes. This isn't just for fashion. The lead-based compound actually helps protect your eyes from the harsh sun glare and may even have some antibacterial properties. The Egyptians didn't know about bacteria, of course, but they noticed that eye infections seemed less common among those who used kohl. Religiously dot your morning routine is complete. You're clean, your floor smells faintly of cow, and your eyes are dramatically lined with toxic heavy metals. Time to face the day. Step outside your mud brick house and take a deep breath. That smell, that rich, slightly rotten, overwhelmingly organic smell, that's the Nile River. It's the source of everything. Your entire civilization exists because of that river. And your entire civilization could be destroyed by it too. The Nile flows north through Egypt, cutting a narrow ribbon of green through an otherwise inhospitable desert. On either side of that ribbon, there's nothing but sand and rock stretching to the horizon. Without the Nile, Egypt would be as lifeless as the Sahara that surrounds it. With the Nile, it's one of the most productive agricultural regions in the ancient world. Every year, like clockwork, the Nile floods. The waters begin rising in June, peak in September, and recede by November. When they recede, they leave behind a layer of rich, black silt carried all the way from the highlands of Ethiopia. This silt is essentially free fertilizer, deposited across your fields without any effort on your part. The Egyptians call their country Kemet, meaning the black land, because of this dark, fertile soil. The surrounding desert they call Deshret, the red land. But here's the thing about the flood. Sometimes it doesn't come. Sometimes the rains fail in Ethiopia, and the Nile rises only a little or not at all. When this happens, famine follows. Your crops wither. Your stored grain runs out. People start dying. The pharaoh's astronomers and priests track the flood levels obsessively, recording them on stone markers called nilometers. A low flood is cause for national panic. Sometimes the flood comes too strong. The waters rise higher than expected, washing away homes and drowning livestock. Your carefully maintained irrigation channels overflow. Your house, made of sun-dried mud bricks, starts to dissolve. Too much flood is almost as bad as too little. And then there's what lives in the Nile. Crocodiles, obviously. The Nile crocodile can grow up to 16 feet long and has been perfected by millions of years of evolution into an absolutely flawless killing machine. It lurks in the shallows, invisible until the moment it lunges. Dozens of Egyptians die every year to crocodile attacks, usually while drawing water or washing clothes at the river's edge. But crocodiles aren't even the most dangerous animal in the Nile. That honor goes to the hippopotamus. Hippos kill more people in Africa than any other large animal, and ancient Egypt was absolutely crawling with them. A hippo can bite a crocodile in half. It can flip a fishing boat with casual ease. It's territorial, aggressive, and surprisingly fast, both in water and on land. The Egyptians fear hippos so much that they associate them with Set, the god of chaos and violence. Not you need the Nile to survive. You also need to be constantly terrified of it. This is the Egyptian way. Your stomach is growling. Time for breakfast. Unfortunately, breakfast in ancient Egypt is going to be a bit different from what you're used to. If you're enjoying this journey through ancient Egyptian misery, take a second to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And I promise the food situation, it's even more depressing from here. The foundation of the Egyptian diet is bread and beer. That's not an exaggeration or a simplification. The average Egyptian consumes bread and beer at virtually every meal, supplemented by whatever vegetables, fish, or occasional meat they can get their hands on. Your wages, if you work for the state, are paid in bread and beer rations. The economy essentially runs on bread and beer. The bread itself is made from emmer wheat, an ancient grain that's harder to process than modern wheat. Women in your household spend hours every day grinding grain on stone querns, turning the hard kernels into flour through sheer repetitive labor. This is backbreaking work that wears down the body and, as we'll discuss shortly, destroys the teeth. Here's the problem with your bread. The grinding process inevitably incorporates tiny particles of stone into the flour. The sand that gets into absolutely everything also ends up in your bread. When you bite into your morning loaf, you're essentially eating a low-grade sandpaper that slowly wears away your tooth enamel with every single meal. By the time you're 30, your teeth will be worn down to nubs. We'll talk more about this nightmare later. For protein, you might have some dried fish. The Nile is full of fish, and Egyptians of all social classes eat them regularly. They're usually dried or salted for preservation, giving them a chewy, intensely salty character. Fresh fish is a luxury reserved for those who live close to the river and can eat their catch immediately. Vegetables are available depending on the season. Onions are incredibly popular and eaten at nearly every meal. Garlic too. Leeks, lettuce, cucumbers, and various legumes round out the vegetable options. Fruits include dates, figs, and grapes, though these are more expensive and often reserved for special occasions or the wealthy. Meat is rare for common people. If you eat meat at all, it's probably goose or duck, as these birds are relatively easy to raise. Beef is expensive and usually appears only at religious festivals or in the homes of the wealthy. Pork exists, but is somewhat taboo, associated with the god Set and avoided by many Egyptians. And then there's the beer. Egyptian beer is nothing like modern beer. It's thick, cloudy and nutritious, almost more of a liquid bread than a beverage. The fermentation process adds calories and some B vitamins to your diet. Workers drink beer throughout the day, partly because it's safer than water, and partly because mild intoxication makes brutal labor slightly more bearable. This is breakfast. This is also lunch. This is also dinner. Get used to it. Let's talk about your teeth, because they're currently in the process of being destroyed. And you should probably be aware of that dot. Remember that bread you just ate? The one made from emmer wheat ground on stone querns? Every bite of that bread contained microscopic particles of grit. Sand from the desert that gets into everything. Fragments of the grinding stones themselves. Bits of husk that were never properly removed. You just chewed and swallowed all of it, and it has begun its slow, relentless work on your tooth enamel. Egyptian mummies consistently show one thing regardless of social class: devastated teeth. Pharaohs and peasants alike suffered from extreme tooth wear, abscesses, and dental disease. The grit in their bread wore their teeth down to the roots over decades of eating. By middle age, many Egyptians had lost most of their teeth entirely. But tooth wear is just the beginning of your dental problems. Once your enamel is gone, bacteria can invade the soft pulp inside your teeth. Infections set in. Abscesses form. These abscesses can grow large enough to deform the jawbone, creating visible swelling that archaeologists can still see in skeletal remains. Thousands of years later, an infected tooth abscess doesn't just hurt. It can kill you. The infection can spread to your bloodstream, causing sepsis. It can spread to your brain, causing meningitis. It can spread to your heart, causing endocarditis. There are no antibiotics in ancient Egypt. There are no sterile dental procedures. Once an infection takes hold, your options are limited to hoping it drains on its own, or having someone attempt to extract the offending tooth with bronze tools and no anesthesia. Egyptian medical. Papyri contain numerous remedies for tooth pain. Most of them don't work. One popular treatment involves packing the affected tooth with a mixture of honey and ground cumin. Another suggests applying a paste made from frankincense and celery. These treatments might provide temporary relief, but they do nothing to address the underlying infection. The Egyptians knew their teeth were a problem. They associated dental health with general well-being and employed specialists who focused specifically on tooth diseases. But without understanding germ theory or having access to modern dentistry, there was little they could do. You ate bread. The bread contained grit. The grit destroyed your teeth. Your destroyed teeth became infected. The infection potentially killed you. This was simply the price of civilization. Bread was the foundation of Egyptian society, and dental destruction was the inevitable consequence. Every loaf was a small sacrifice of enamel, paid gradually over a lifetime until nothing remained. Now that you've eaten your teeth-destroying breakfast and contemplated the crocodiles waiting in the Nile, it's time to go to work. The question is, what kind of work? Ancient Egyptian society is rigidly hierarchical. At the top sits the pharaoh, living god and absolute ruler. Below him are the priests and nobles, followed by scribes and skilled craftsmen, then farmers and laborers, and finally servants and slaves. Your position in this hierarchy was largely determined at birth. Social mobility exists, but it's rare and difficult. If you're reading this, statistically speaking, you're probably a farmer. The vast majority of Egyptians work the land, growing the crops that feed the civilization. Your life follows the rhythm of the Nile. During the flood season, when your fields are underwater, you might be conscripted for state labor projects. When the waters recede, you plant. During the growing season, you tend your crops and maintain the irrigation channels. At harvest time, you work from dawn to dusk, bringing in the grain. Farming in Egypt is brutally hard work. You don't have tractors or combine harvesters. What you have is a wooden plow pulled by oxen if you're lucky, or by your own family if you're not. You have hand sickles for cutting grain. You have your own back for carrying heavy loads. The sun beats down relentlessly, and the work never ends. Perhaps you're a construction worker instead. The pharaoh is always building something, whether it's temples, palaces, tombs, or monuments. Construction work pays in bread and beer rations and provides a certain job security. But the labor is dangerous. Workers fall from scaffolding. Heavy stones crush limbs. The dust from cutting limestone destroys lungs. Medical papyri specifically mention injuries common to construction workers, treating them almost as occupational hazards. You might be a miner, extracting copper from the Sinai Peninsula or gold from the Nubian desert. Mining is perhaps the worst job in Egypt. You work underground in cramped, poorly ventilated tunnels. You breathe rock dust constantly. You might be sent to distant, inhospitable regions for months at a time. Many miners are conscripted laborers or prisoners of war, sent to the mines as a form of punishment barely distinguishable from a death sentence. Or perhaps you're a soldier in Pharaoh's army. Egypt is frequently at war with its neighbors, campaigning into Nubia to the south, Libya to the west, and the Levant to the northeast. Military life offers opportunities for advancement and plunder, but it also offers excellent opportunities to be killed by foreign enemies, die of disease on campaign, or succumb to wounds in an era before antibiotics. Choose your misery carefully. You'll be living with it for a long time, assuming you survive. Speaking of survival, let's talk about taxes. Because in ancient Egypt, failing to pay your taxes could end your life just as surely as a crocodile or an infected tooth. And while we're on the subject of things that might kill you, remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already. The algorithm is watching, and unlike the Egyptian tax system, it responds to positive feedback. The Egyptian tax system is comprehensive and inescapable. The pharaoh owns everything: the land, the water, the crops, the livestock, the labor of every person in Egypt. All of it belongs to the living God. You don't really own your farm. You hold it at the pharaoh's pleasure, and in exchange for this privilege, you owe him a substantial portion of everything you produce. Tax assessment begins with the annual flood. Scribes from the pharaoh's administration measure the flood levels and survey the fields to estimate the upcoming harvest. Based on these estimates, they calculate how much grain each farmer owes. This assessment happens before you've even planted, let alone harvested. If the actual harvest falls short of the estimate, that's your problem, not the tax collectors. Payment is due after harvest. Tax collectors, accompanied by armed guards, visit each farm to collect what's owed. They're not interested in excuses. They don't care that the flood was lower than expected, or that pests destroyed part of your crop, or that your oxen died and you couldn't plow half your fields. The assessment was made. The payment is due. End of discussion. What happens if you can't pay? The consequences escalate quickly. First, you might be beaten. Physical punishment for tax defaulters is routine and administered publicly as a warning to others. The scribes keep detailed records, and a pattern of non-payment earns you a reputation as a troublemaker. If beating doesn't produce results, your property can be seized. Your livestock, your stored grain, your household goods, all of it can be taken to satisfy your debt. In extreme cases, your land itself might be confiscated, leaving you with nothing. And if that's not enough, you personally can be seized. Chronic tax defaulters might be conscripted for corvée labor, essentially state-mandated forced work on construction projects. You'll be sent to quarry stone, haul blocks for temples, or dig irrigation channels until your debt is considered paid. This isn't slavery exactly, but it's close enough that the distinction probably won't comfort you. The tax system is not designed to be fair. It's designed to extract maximum resources from the population while maintaining enough stability to prevent revolt. Pay your taxes or suffer the consequences. This is the Egyptian way. Let's return to your home, that humble mud brick structure we woke up in this morning. It's now midday, and you're about to discover exactly how hot a house made of sun-dried mud can get. Egyptian houses are designed for the climate, but designed doesn't mean comfortable. The thick mud brick walls absorb the morning sun, slowly heating throughout the day. By afternoon, your house has become a thermal mass radiating heat from every surface. The interior temperature can exceed what you would experience standing directly in the sun. This is why Egyptians spend so much time outdoors or on their rooftops. During the hottest months, families often sleep on the flat roof of their house, where they can catch whatever breeze might be passing by. The roof becomes an extension of the living space, used for cooking, working, and escaping the oven-like interior below. Your house has small windows placed high on the walls, designed to allow hot air to escape while blocking direct sunlight. But ventilation in a mud brick house is always a compromise. Larger openings would let in more air, but also more sun, more dust, and more pests. The small, high windows are the best solution Egyptian architects have devised, even if they don't actually solve the problem. Furniture is minimal. You have a few low stools, some reed mats, maybe a wooden chest for storing valuables. Beds are a luxury reserved for the wealthy. Most Egyptians sleep on reed mats laid directly on the floor, perhaps with a wooden headrest to support the neck. These headrests look incredibly uncomfortable to modern eyes, but they keep your head off the ground and away from the insects that crawl across the floor at night. Lighting comes from small oil lamps, clay dishes filled with oil with a floating wick. These provide a dim, flickering light and produce considerable smoke. By evening, your house is a murky cave lit by dancing shadows. Cooking happens, either in a small courtyard attached to your house or on the roof. You don't want an open fire inside your mud brick house any more than necessary. The courtyard often contains a clay oven for baking bread and a few storage jars for water and grain. If you're lucky, you might have a small garden, growing herbs and vegetables. This is home. It's cramped, hot, dark, and requires constant maintenance to keep from literally dissolving in the rain. But it's yours, assuming you keep paying your taxes. You might have noticed by now that you're not wearing much. This is entirely appropriate for the climate and the culture. Ancient Egyptian fashion prioritizes practicality over modesty. At least by modern standards, the fabric of choice is linen, made from flax plants grown along the Nile. Linen is light, breathable, and relatively easy to produce. It's also difficult to dye, which is why most Egyptian clothing is white or off-white. Colored garments exist, but are expensive and usually reserved for the wealthy or for special occasions. If you're a man of the working class, your wardrobe probably consists of a single garment, the shenty, a simple loincloth or kilt wrapped around your waist and tied in front. That's it. No shirt, no underwear, no shoes. You work in the brutal Egyptian sun wearing essentially a cotton towel around your hips. Women typically wear a sheath, dress called a calasiris, a simple tube of linen that extends from the breasts to the ankles, held up by one or two shoulder straps. Working class women might wear shorter versions that allow more freedom of movement. In private or during certain work activities, women might go topless like men. Children often wear nothing at all until they reach puberty. There's no point wasting precious fabric on bodies that are still growing. Nudity among children is completely normal and attracts no particular attention. Now let's talk about what's living in your clothes. Lice are endemic in ancient Egypt. Body lice live in the seams of your linen garments, crawling out to feed on your blood before returning to the fabric to lay eggs. Head lice infest your scalp, spreading easily in crowded households. Pubic lice complete the trinity of parasites that consider your body their home. This is why many Egyptians shave their heads completely. Both men and women remove all their body hair, not for aesthetic reasons, but for practical hygiene. Hair provides habitat for lice. Remove the hair, and you remove much of the problem. Wealthy Egyptians who want the appearance of hair wear elaborate wigs, which can be removed and cleaned far more easily than actual hair. The battle against lice is constant and never truly won. Every Egyptian carries passengers, whether they shave or not. It's simply another fact of life in the ancient world. Eventually, inevitably, you're going to get sick or injured. When that happens, you'll turn to Egyptian medicine, which is simultaneously impressive and terrifying. Egyptian doctors are among the best in the ancient world. They have detailed anatomical knowledge from centuries of mummification practice. They keep careful records of symptoms and treatments. They understand that certain conditions have natural causes and can be treated with natural remedies. Foreign kings sometimes request Egyptian physicians, recognizing their superior skill. The primary medical texts include the Ebers Papyrus, the Edwin Smith Papyrus, and the Kahun Papyrus. These documents contain hundreds of prescriptions for various ailments, ranging from eye infections to pregnancy complications to stomach disorders. Many of the treatments are surprisingly rational. Honey, for example, is prescribed for wounds, and we now know that honey has genuine antibacterial properties. But Egyptian medicine is also deeply intertwined with magic and religion. Disease can be caused by natural factors, but it can also be caused by demons, curses, or the displeasure of the gods. A physician treating your illness might prescribe a poultice and a prayer with equal confidence and both dot the ingredients in. Egyptian prescriptions range from sensible to nightmarish. You might be given honey for a wound, reasonable enough. You might be given willow bark for pain, which contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin. So far, so good. But you might also be prescribed crocodile dung as a contraceptive, donkey teeth ground into powder, or a poultice made from human excrement. Surgical procedures exist, but are risky. Egyptian physicians can set broken bones, drain abscesses, and perform basic amputations. They have bronze surgical instruments that wouldn't look entirely out of place in a modern operating room. But they have no anesthesia beyond alcohol and no understanding of germ theory. Any surgery carries a significant risk of infection and death. If your condition is serious, you might be taken to a temple for healing sleep. You'd spend the night in a special dormitory, hoping that a god would visit you in dreams and reveal the cure for your illness. This sounds like superstition, but the placebo effect is real and rests in a calm. Sacred environment probably did help some patients recover. Egyptian medicine is a strange mixture of science and magic, keen observation and wild speculation. It's better than nothing, which is fortunate because nothing is your alternative. If you're a woman in ancient Egypt, or if you're married to one, childbirth looms large in your future. And that future is statistically terrifying. If this content is helping you drift off to sleep, take a moment to hit subscribe. Your support helps me create more historical nightmares for your bedtime listening. The average Egyptian woman who survives to adulthood will be pregnant many times. Contraception exists, but is unreliable. One popular method involves a pessary made from crocodile dung mixed with honey and natron, inserted into the vagina before intercourse. The acidity might actually have some contraceptive effect, but it's far from foolproof. Other methods include drinking various herbal concoctions or wearing magical amulets. None of them work particularly well when pregnancy occurs. It's monitored with a mixture of practical knowledge and superstition. One pregnancy test involves urinating on bags of wheat and barley seeds. If the wheat sprouts, you're having a girl. If the barley sprouts, a boy. If neither sprouts, you're not pregnant. Remarkably, modern testing has shown this method has some validity, as hormones in pregnant women's urine can actually affect seed germination. Childbirth itself is a dangerous ordeal. Women give birth in a squatting position, supported by birth bricks or by attendants. The delivery is managed by midwives, not physicians. Pain relief is limited to prayers, amulets, and perhaps some herbal preparations. Complications are common and often fatal. Obstructed labor, hemorrhage, infection. All of these kill Egyptian women with depressing regularity. If the baby is positioned wrong, if the pelvis is too narrow, if the placenta fails to detach properly, there's little anyone can do. The physicians have no cesarean section, no blood transfusions, no antibiotics. For the babies who survive birth, the challenges continue. Infant mortality in ancient Egypt is staggering by modern standards. Perhaps 1 in 3 children dies before reaching age 5. Diarrheal diseases spread through contaminated water. Respiratory infections tear through households. Malaria is endemic along the Nile. Simple fevers can escalate to death in days. Egyptian parents love their children fiercely, but they also understand that many of those children will never reach adulthood. This is simply the reality of life before modern medicine. You have many children because you know not all of them will survive. Let's talk about the pyramids. Not the monuments themselves, but the people who built them. Because you might be one of those people. If the pharaoh decides he needs your labor, contrary to popular belief, the pyramids were not built by slaves. They were built by Egyptian workers, some permanent employees, and many conscripted through the corvée system. During the flood season, when farmers couldn't work their fields anyway, thousands were pressed into service, hauling stones across the desert. The workers lived in purpose-built villages near the construction sites. Archaeologists have excavated these villages and found bakeries, breweries, medical facilities, and even facilities for producing specialized copper tools. The workers were fed well by ancient standards. Beef bones found in the trash heaps suggest they ate better than they would have at home. But don't mistake adequate rations for easy living. The work itself was brutal. Massive limestone blocks weighing several tons each had to be quarried, transported, and positioned with nothing but human muscle, wooden sledges, and ramps. Workers pulled these blocks across the sand, pouring water ahead of the sledges to reduce friction. Injuries were constant. Crushed fingers and toes, strained backs, falls from ramps and scaffolding. The medical facilities in the workers' villages weren't there because the pharaoh cared about worker welfare. They were there because injured workers couldn't work, and the project had to maintain its schedule. The construction season lasted several months, during which workers lived away from their families in crowded barracks. They worked 10-day weeks with 1 day off for rest. The work gang records show absenteeism for various reasons, including hangover, which suggests the beer rations were sometimes consumed in quantities that affected productivity. When the flood receded and planting season began, most workers returned to their farms. But some stayed year-round as skilled craftsmen, masons, and laborers. These permanent workers spent their entire careers cutting and placing stone, their lungs filling with limestone dust, their bodies breaking down under the constant strain. The pyramids are magnificent achievements. They're also monuments to human suffering on an industrial scale. You cannot understand ancient Egypt without understanding its religion, because religion permeates every aspect of daily life. The gods are not distant beings worshipped on special occasions. They're present everywhere, all the time, involved in everything from the rise of the Nile to the baking of your bread. The Egyptian pantheon is vast and complicated. At the top sits Ra, the sun god, who sails across the sky each day and journeys through the underworld each night. Osiris rules the dead. Isis protects mothers and children. Horus represents the living pharaoh. Set embodies chaos and violence. Thoth invented writing. Anubis guides souls to the afterlife. And these are just the major deities. Hundreds of minor gods oversee specific places, activities, and aspects of nature. Your house contains a small shrine where you make daily offerings to household gods. Before eating, you might set aside a portion for the gods. Before sleeping, you might say a prayer for protection. Your children wear amulets shaped like protective deities. Even your cosmetics and toiletries invoke divine blessing. The temples are the domain of the priests, not ordinary people. You don't go to temple to worship the way modern people might go to church. The temple is the god's house, and only priests may enter the inner sanctums where the divine images reside. Your participation in public religion is limited to festivals, when the god statue is carried outside for procession. These festivals are the highlights of the religious calendar. The Opet festival celebrates the renewal of the pharaoh's divine power. The beautiful festival of the valley honors the dead. The Wepet Renpet marks the new year and the coming flood. During festivals, work stops, beer flows freely, and the entire community gathers to celebrate that religion. Also means restrictions. Certain foods are taboo in certain regions. Pork is generally avoided. Certain fish are forbidden during certain seasons. Specific behaviors can offend specific gods, bringing bad luck or worse. The priests interpret divine will and instruct the people on proper behavior. You live in a world filled with invisible forces, where every action might please or anger the gods, where amulets and prayers offer your only protection against malevolent spirits. This isn't superstition to you. It's simply how reality works. The Egyptian state runs on bureaucracy. Endless, meticulous, all-encompassing bureaucracy. Scribes record everything. Tax assessments, labor conscription lists, legal proceedings, temple inventories, military rosters. Everything generates documents that must be copied, filed, and preserved. At the heart of this system are the scribes. To become a scribe is to secure one of the best positions available to a common Egyptian. Scribes don't do manual labor. They work indoors, out of the sun. They earn good salaries and enjoy considerable social status. A famous ancient Egyptian text puts it bluntly: be a scribe and spare your body the suffering of manual work. But becoming a scribe is not easy. You need to master hieratic script, the cursive form of hieroglyphics used for everyday documents. You need to learn mathematics well enough to calculate taxes, rations, and construction requirements. You need to memorize the formulas and phrases appropriate for different types of documents. Education takes years and is available primarily to the sons of existing scribes and officials. The bureaucracy tracks you from birth to death. When you're born, your name is recorded. When you marry, it's recorded. When you inherit property or sell it, recorded. When you're conscripted for labor or military service, recorded. When you pay your taxes or fail to pay them, recorded. When you die, the disposition of your property is recorded. This documentation serves the state's interests, not yours. If there's ever a dispute about tax assessment, the records will support the state's position. If you're accused of shirking labor obligations, the records will prove your absence. The bureaucracy is a system of control, keeping track of every resource and every person in Egypt, so they can be properly exploited. The scribes who operate this system are not cruel by nature. They're functionaries following procedures established by generations of predecessors. But the system itself is designed to extract maximum value from the population, and the scribes are its instruments. When the tax collector arrives with his documentation showing exactly what you owe, there's no point arguing. The records are official. The records are final. Welcome to bureaucracy. It's been controlling human lives for 5,000 years, and it's only getting warmed up. What happens if you break the law in ancient Egypt? The answer depends on what you did and who you are. But regardless of the suffix, it probably won't be pleasant. Egyptian law is administered through a combination of local tribunals and central courts. Minor disputes might be settled by village elders or local officials. Serious crimes go before a proper court, presided over by appointed judges who hear testimony, examine evidence, and deliver verdicts. The legal system has some features that would be recognizable today. Witnesses can be called. Documents can be entered as evidence. The accused has the right to speak in their own defense. But there's also a key difference. Torture is a legitimate investigatory tool. If the authorities believe you committed a crime but lack proof, they can beat you until you confess. The confession obtained under torture is considered valid evidence. Punishments for minor offenses might include fines or beatings. Theft is punished by requiring the thief to return the stolen goods, plus additional compensation, typically 2 or 3 times the value of what was taken. If you can't pay, you work it off through labor More serious crimes bring more serious punishments. Assault might cost you a nose or an ear, cut off to permanently mark you as a criminal. Robbery might cost you a hand. These mutilations serve both as punishment and as warning to others. Walking around with a missing nose advertises your criminal past to everyone who sees you. Treason, tomb robbery, and certain religious offenses can be punished by death. Methods include impalement, burning, and drowning. In some cases, the criminal's family can be punished alongside them, especially for crimes against the pharaoh or the state. Your rebellion might get your children enslaved. There's also a fate considered worse than death, being denied proper burial. Without the correct funerary rites, your soul cannot enter the afterlife. You'll wander eternally as a restless spirit, never finding peace. This threat holds particular power in a society that believes absolutely in life after death. The legal system is not designed to rehabilitate. It's designed to maintain order through fear, obey the law, or suffer consequences that everyone will see. Egypt is not always at peace. The pharaohs regularly campaign against neighboring peoples, expanding Egyptian territory, securing trade routes, and acquiring slaves and tribute. If you're a young man of military age, you might find yourself marching off to war. If you're settling in for sleep, now's a good time to subscribe and leave a comment about what topic you'd like me to cover next. Sweet dreams of ancient warfare ahead. The Egyptian army is organized into divisions of roughly 5,000 men, each named after a major god. Within each division, soldiers are grouped into companies and platoons, each with designated officers responsible for their training and discipline. As a common soldier, your equipment depends on your role. Infantry carry wooden shields covered in leather, bronze-tipped spears, and axes for close combat. Archers carry composite bows, powerful weapons that can send arrows through armor at considerable distance. If you're fortunate enough to serve in the chariot corps, you ride into battle in a light, fast vehicle designed for archery and harassment rather than direct charges. Military campaigns take you far from home. To the south, Egypt fights the Nubians for control of gold mines and trade routes. To the northeast, Egypt competes with powers like the Hittites and Mitanni for control of the Levantine coast. These campaigns can last months, marching through hostile territory, enduring desert heat, fighting pitched battles, and besieging fortified cities. Combat in this era is brutally personal. You see the face of the enemy you're trying to kill. You smell their sweat and blood. You hear their screams when your spear finds its mark. There's no artillery support, no airstrikes, no long-range weapons that kill from safe distances. It's bronze against flesh, again and again, until one side breaks and runs. Wounds are common and often fatal. An arrow through the gut means a slow, agonizing death as infection sets in. A sword cut to the limb might be survivable if it doesn't hit a major artery. Field medicine consists of bandaging wounds and hoping for the best. Victory brings rewards, slaves, plunder, and honor. Soldiers can earn land grants for distinguished service. Defeat brings death or slavery. There's no Geneva Convention. Prisoners are property of the pharaoh, to be put to work or executed as he sees fit. Perhaps you're not a farmer or a soldier. Perhaps you're a servant in a wealthy household, which sounds like it might be better, but comes with its own particular indignities. Servants in ancient Egypt occupy a social position somewhere between free laborers and slaves. You're attached to a household, dependent on your master for food, clothing, and shelter. You work at their direction, performing whatever tasks are assigned. In exchange, you have a degree of security that independent laborers might lack. Your duties depend on your skills and your master's needs. Household servants clean, cook, fetch water, do laundry, and maintain the property. Personal servants attend directly to family members, helping them dress, applying their cosmetics, and accompanying them when they leave the house. Specialized servants might manage specific aspects of the household. The kitchen, the stables, the household accounts. Life as a servant means constant awareness of your inferior status. You bow when your master enters the room. You speak only when spoken to. You sleep in the servants' quarters, eat in the servants' hall, and enter the main house only to perform your duties. Your time is not your own. If your master wants you at midnight, you come at midnight. But servant status also offers advantages. You eat regularly, even when harvests fail. You have a roof over your head, even during the flood. If your master is wealthy, you might live better materially than many free farmers. Some servants become valued members of the household, trusted with important responsibilities and treated almost as extended family. The household hierarchy is strict. Senior servants supervise junior ones. The household steward manages everything, answering directly to the master. Disputes among servants are settled by their superiors, not by external authorities. You live in a small world with its own rules, and your survival depends on navigating those rules successfully. Some servants save enough to buy their freedom. Others remain in service their entire lives, eventually dying in the same household where they began. Your fate depends partly on luck, partly on your master's character, and partly on your own ability to make yourself indispensable. Beer is not a recreational beverage in ancient Egypt. It's a dietary staple consumed by everyone from pharaohs to peasants at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Understanding Egyptian beer means understanding Egyptian survival. The brewing process begins with barley or emmer wheat, partially germinated to convert starches into fermentable sugars. This malted grain is mixed with water and formed into loaves, which are lightly baked. The baked loaves are then crumbled into large vats, mixed with more water, and left to ferment. The resulting liquid is thick, cloudy, and nutritious. It looks nothing like the clear, fizzy beer you might be imagining. It's more like a thin, alcoholic porridge, often consumed through a straw to filter out the chunky residue. The alcohol content is lower than modern beer, perhaps 2 to 4%, enough to provide a mild buzz, but not enough to incapacitate someone who drinks it throughout the day. This beer provides significant nutritional value. The fermentation process creates B vitamins that would otherwise be absent from the Egyptian diet. The alcohol itself provides calories. The yeast is a source of protein. In a very real sense, beer is liquid bread, a nutritionally complete food that can sustain life when solid food is scarce. Beer is also safer than water. The Nile is full of parasites and bacteria. Drinking untreated river water is an invitation to dysentery, typhoid, and a host of other diseases. The brewing process kills most pathogens, making beer a safer alternative. Parents give beer to their children, not to get them drunk, but to keep them healthy. The importance of beer to Egyptian society cannot be overstated. Wages are paid in beer rations. Temple offerings include beer. The dead are buried with beer for the afterlife. A special goddess, Tenenet, oversees the brewing process. Beer is life in ancient Egypt, and the ability to produce it is one of the most important skills a household can possess. If you're surviving in ancient Egypt, you're drinking beer multiple times a day, every day. Until you die. The Egyptian landscape is alive with animals, and many of them want you dead. We've already discussed the crocodiles and hippopotamuses that haunt the Nile, but the dangers don't end at the water's edge. Venomous snakes slither through your fields, and sometimes into your home. Cobras and vipers are common, and their bites can be fatal within hours. Egyptian medical papyri contain numerous treatments for snakebite, most of them useless. Scorpions are everywhere. They hide in shoes, under stones, and in the cracks of mud brick walls. Their sting is intensely painful and potentially lethal, especially to children and the elderly. You learn to shake out your sandals before putting them on. You learn to watch where you place your hands when reaching into dark spaces. Lions prowl the desert margins. They're less common than they once were, hunted by pharaohs as displays of royal power, but they still occasionally take livestock and threaten humans. Hyenas scavenge near villages. Wild dogs travel in packs that can overwhelm a lone traveler. But not all Egyptian animals are threats. Some are sacred. Cats are associated with the goddess Bastet and are protected by law. Killing a cat, even accidentally, can result in severe punishment. When cats die, their owners shave their eyebrows in mourning and sometimes mummify the deceased feline. Ibises are sacred to Thoth and protected similarly. Certain baboons are considered manifestations of the gods. Crocodiles, despite their danger, are sacred in some regions and raised in temple pools. The sacred animals live better than many humans. Cattle, donkeys, and goats provide labor, milk, and meat. Ducks and geese supply eggs and protein. These domesticated animals are valuable property, essential to survival and carefully tended. Losing livestock to disease or predators can devastate a family's livelihood. You share your world with animals that can kill you, animals that can help you, and animals that are literally divine. Managing your relationships with all of them is part of the challenge of Egyptian life. Death is not the end in ancient Egypt. It's a transition, a journey to another realm where the worthy live forever in the field of reeds. A perfect paradise modeled on the best aspects of earthly Egypt. But getting there requires preparation, and preparation costs money. The ideal Egyptian burial involves mummification, the preservation of the body so the soul can recognize and return to it. Full mummification is a complex, expensive process that takes 70 days. The internal organs are removed and preserved in canopic jars. The body is dried with natron, stuffed with linen and sawdust to restore its shape, and wrapped in layers of linen bandages. Amulets are placed within the wrappings to protect the deceased in the afterlife. This process costs more than most Egyptians earn in years of labor. A proper burial also requires a tomb, funerary furniture, offerings of food and drink, and the services of priests to perform the necessary rituals. The wealthy can afford elaborate burials. The poor cannot dot what happens to ordinary people when they die. The truth is, we don't entirely know. The archaeological record is biased toward the wealthy, whose tombs survived because they were built to last. But we can make educated guesses. Poor Egyptians are probably buried in simple graves in the desert sand. The dry conditions naturally mummify bodies to some extent, preserving them without expensive intervention. Grave goods are minimal, perhaps a few pottery vessels, a personal amulet, whatever small treasures the family could spare. The elaborate funerary industry serves the elite. For common people, death means a hole in the ground and whatever farewell your family can afford. The afterlife may be open to all, but the journey there is much easier if you have money. This creates enormous anxiety. Egyptians spend their entire lives thinking about death, saving for burial expenses, hoping they'll have enough when the time comes. The afterlife industry profits from this fear, selling everything from mummification services to magical texts, guaranteeing passage through the underworld. If you're a woman in ancient Egypt, you have more rights than women in most ancient societies. This is setting an extremely low bar, but it's worth noting. Egyptian women can own property. They can inherit from their parents and their husbands. They can engage in business transactions, buying and selling goods in their own names. They can bring lawsuits and testify in court. These rights are remarkable for the ancient world, where women in many societies are essentially property themselves. Marriage in Egypt is primarily an economic arrangement. You don't need a ceremony or official registration, just an agreement between families and the establishment of a shared household. Divorce is similarly straightforward. Either party can initiate it, and the wife is entitled to keep her personal property and often receives a share of property acquired during the marriage. Women can work outside the home. Many serve as priestesses, holding positions of genuine religious authority. Others work as musicians, dancers, and professional mourners. Midwifery is a female profession. Some women manage businesses, particularly in textile production and food service. A few women even rise to positions of political power, including the famous female pharaohs, Hatshepsut and Cleopatra. But these opportunities exist within a fundamentally patriarchal society. Men hold almost all positions of political power. Husbands legally represent their households in most official matters. Women's work, however valuable, is generally seen as less important than men's work. Domestic labor, including the endless grinding of grain, falls primarily on women. Women also bear the dangers of childbirth, as we discussed earlier. Their bodies are considered mysterious and somewhat threatening, subject to various taboos during menstruation and pregnancy. Medical texts written by male physicians reveal considerable confusion about female anatomy and health. Ancient Egyptian women have more freedom than their counterparts in Greece, or Rome, or Mesopotamia. But they still live in a world designed by men, for men. They make the best of their situation, as women always have. We've discussed how the Nile flood sustains Egyptian civilization. Now let's discuss what happens when it fails. If you're still awake and learning about ancient horrors, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And honestly, hearing about famine might help put your own problems in perspective. Low floods happen periodically. The rains fail in Ethiopia. The Nile rises only partially, and the silt deposits are thin and patchy. Farmers plant their crops, but the yields are poor. Granaries that should be full are only half full. Prices rise. Belts tighten out. Sometimes the low floods continue for multiple years in succession. When this happens, catastrophe follows. Egyptian texts describe famines in vivid, horrifying detail. Granaries empty. The poor sell everything they own, then their children, then themselves, seeking any source of food. Bodies lie unburied in the streets because no one has the strength to move them. Cannibalism, normally the ultimate taboo, becomes survival. One famous text, the admonitions of Epure, describes a collapse so complete that servants rule masters. Gold lies scattered in the streets with no one to pick it up, and the land is overrun with violence as starving people turn on each other. Scholars debate whether this text describes real events or is a literary warning, but the fears it expresses are certainly real. The state maintains emergency grain reserves for exactly these situations. In theory, the pharaoh's granaries can sustain the population through a year or two of poor harvests. In practice, reserves are often smaller than claimed, and distribution is uneven. The wealthy have connections. The poor have nothing. During famines, people migrate. They abandon their homes and walk toward anywhere that might have food. Some travel to other regions of Egypt. Some cross borders into foreign lands. Entire communities dissolve as families scatter in search of survival. This is the fragility underlying Egyptian prosperity. One river, one flood, one failure, and civilization teeters on the edge of collapse. The Egyptians know this. They build monuments that will last forever, but they live always in the shadow of potential extinction. Let's say you've survived childhood diseases, crocodile attacks, infected teeth, famine years, and military service. Congratulations, you might actually reach old age. Now let's discuss what that looks like. The average Egyptian life expectancy is around 35 years. This doesn't mean everyone dies at 35. It means high child mortality drags the average down, while those who survive childhood might live considerably longer. Some Egyptians reach their 60s or even 70s, though this is uncommon. Old age brings accumulated damage. Your teeth, worn down by decades of gritty bread, are mostly gone. Your joints ache from years of physical labor. Your eyes may be clouded by cataracts, a common condition in sunny climates. Your hearing is probably diminished. Egyptian medical texts describe treatments for the ailments of old age, including recipes for restoring hair color, reducing wrinkles, and maintaining sexual function. The effectiveness of these treatments is questionable at best. You can't reverse the damage of a lifetime with herbal remedies and magic spells. The elderly depend on their families for care. There are no nursing homes, no social security, no pension systems. If your children prosper, you prosper. If they don't, you suffer. Parents invest heavily in their children, precisely because those children are their old age insurance. Respect for elders is a cultural value, reinforced by religious teachings and legal obligations. Children are expected to care for aging parents and to ensure they receive proper burial. Failing in these duties brings shame and potentially divine punishment. But respect doesn't necessarily mean comfort. Elderly Egyptians often continue working as long as they're physically able, because there's no one to support them otherwise. Grandparents watch children while parents work. Elderly craftsmen teach their skills to apprentices. There's no retirement in the modern sense, just a gradual reduction in capacity until work becomes impossible. If you're lucky, old age is a time of relative ease, surrounded by family, respected for your wisdom. If you're unlucky, it's a prolonged slide into poverty, dependency, and suffering. Life in ancient Egypt is hard, but it's not all suffering. Egyptians know how to have fun, and they pursue entertainment with considerable enthusiasm. Sports are popular at all social levels. Wrestling matches draw crowds throughout Egypt, with skilled wrestlers achieving something like celebrity status. Swimming and rowing competitions take place on the Nile, hunting in the marshes, pursuing birds and hippos from papyrus boats, is a favorite pastime of the wealthy. Board games offer more sedentary entertainment. Senet is the most popular game in Egypt, played on a board of 30 squares, with pieces moved according to the throw of casting sticks. The game has religious significance, representing the journey through the afterlife, but it's primarily played for fun and gambling. Other games include Mehen, played on a spiral board representing a coiled serpent, and various games of chance. Music accompanies almost every occasion. Professional musicians play at festivals, religious ceremonies, and private parties. Instruments include harps, lutes, flutes, and various percussion instruments. Dancing is performed by professionals, both male and female, who train from childhood in complex choreography. And then there's drinking. We've discussed beer as a dietary staple, but Egyptians also consume wine and stronger beverages when they want to get properly intoxicated. Festival days feature public drinking that makes modern office parties look restrained. Scenes on tomb walls show guests at banquets vomiting from excessive alcohol consumption, attended by servants who hold their heads and clean up the mess. The Egyptians have a saying, "Drink until you're merry, for your day in the grave is long." They take this advice seriously. Life is short, the afterlife is uncertain, and the beer is flowing. Might as well enjoy yourself while you can. At the apex of Egyptian society sits the pharaoh, and his power over your life is absolute. The pharaoh is not merely a king. He's a god in human form, the living incarnation of Horus and the son of Irie. His word is divine law. His officials act with divine authority. Resisting the pharaoh's will is not just treason, it's blasphemy against the cosmic order. This divine authority manifests in very practical ways. The pharaoh owns everything in Egypt. The land, the water, the people, all of it belongs to him by right of divine kingship. When you farm your fields, you do so by his permission. When you keep a portion of your harvest, you do so because he allows it. When you're conscripted for labor, it's because he requires your service. The pharaoh delegates his authority through a vast bureaucratic apparatus. At the top are viziers, essentially prime ministers who oversee the entire government. Below them are governors of individual regions, called nomes. Below them are local officials who manage specific towns and villages. Each level reports to the one above, creating a chain of command that extends from your village headman all the way to the divine throne. This system is remarkably stable. The same basic structure endures for thousands of years, surviving invasions, civil wars, and changes of dynasty. New pharaohs come and go, but the bureaucracy continues, keeping records, collecting taxes, and maintaining order. You never meet the pharaoh. You might catch a glimpse of him during a festival procession, a distant figure carried on a golden throne surrounded by priests and guards. To you, he's less a person than a cosmic principle, the living guarantee that the sun will rise and the Nile will flood and the universe will continue to function as it should. Your relationship with the pharaoh is mediated entirely through his officials. They tell you what he wants. They collect what he's owed. They punish those who disobey. The pharaoh is everywhere and nowhere, omnipresent through his representatives, personally accessible to almost no one. And so we come to the end. Not the end of Egyptian civilization, which will continue for another millennium, but the end of your hypothetical life in ancient Egypt. Before we go, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment about what period of history you'd like to suffer through next. I read every comment, usually while eating bread that definitely doesn't contain sand. You've lived your life. Maybe you survived to old age, surrounded by grandchildren, respected for your years of hard work. Maybe you died young, taken by disease, accident, or violence. Either way, your time in this world is finished. What comes next depends entirely on circumstances beyond your control. If you're wealthy, your body will be mummified according to the proper rituals. Your organs will be preserved in canopic jars. Your mummy will be wrapped with protective amulets and placed in a decorated coffin. Your tomb will contain furniture, food, and the magical texts needed to navigate the underworld. Priests will perform the opening of the mouth ceremony, allowing your mummy to eat, drink, and breathe in the afterlife. If you're not wealthy, well, your experience will be considerably different. Your body might be wrapped in simple linen and buried in a shallow grave in the desert sand. The dry conditions will preserve you somewhat, creating a natural mummy without the elaborate embalming process. Your grave goods will be minimal. A few pottery vessels, perhaps a treasured amulet. Whatever your family could afford. You won't have elaborate tomb paintings showing you in the field of reeds. You won't have a library of magical spells to protect you from underworld demons. You won't have shabby figurines to perform labor on your behalf. You'll face the afterlife with nothing but whatever merit you accumulated in life. But the afterlife is supposed to be open to all, regardless of wealth. The heart of every Egyptian, rich or poor, is weighed against the feather of Nat. Those found worthy pass on to eternal paradise. Those found wanting are devoured by Ammit, the crocodile-headed demon, and cease to exist entirely. Perhaps that's the most democratic aspect of Egyptian religion. In death, at least, the gods judge everyone by the same standard. Whether your tomb is a pyramid or a hole in the sand, your soul faces the same final test. And so your day in ancient Egypt comes to an end. The sun sets over the Nile, painting the western sky in shades of orange and red. The desert cools rapidly, the brutal heat of midday giving way to comfortable evening temperatures. Somewhere in the distance, a hippopotamus bellows. You've lived a life unimaginably different from anything you know. You've eaten bread that destroyed your teeth, drunk beer for nutrition, and feared crocodiles every time you approached the river. You've worked in conditions that would constitute abuse by modern standards. You've buried children who never reached adulthood and worried constantly about floods that might not come. But you've also witnessed wonders. You've seen temples that will stand for millennia, built by the labor of thousands. You've participated in festivals that united your entire community in celebration. You've lived in a civilization so advanced that it will be remembered as the foundation of human history. The ancient Egyptians were not fundamentally different from us. They loved their families, worried about their futures, and hoped for better lives for their children. They told jokes, got drunk at parties, and complained about their bosses. They were human beings, doing the best they could in a world that offered neither mercy nor comfort. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, spare a thought for those ancestors. They built the world we inherited, one backbreaking stone at a time. They survived conditions that would break us, and they did it without complaint. because complaint changed nothing, Dot. Thank you for spending this time in ancient Egypt. The sand is settling, the Nile is flowing, and the stars are the same stars that guided the pharaohs. Let their ancient light carry you to sleep. Rest well. Tomorrow, the pyramid still needs building.